What's going on, everybody? Welcome to South Harmon. I'm Matty Kiwoom. Today, we are talking about 5 buys in fantasy football. These players are not just buys. They are buys if you are looking to win. Now, we are in the most crucial part of the fantasy football regular season. This is where playoffs happen. Playoff runs are created. This is where dreams are dashed. So these 5 players are going to help you win games in the short term. Today, we're going to be using something that I like to call the battle score. Now, what is that? What is the battle score? Well, it's a model that I created using defensive metrics and defensive grades that basically summarize whether a defense is a good matchup, aka they have a low grade, or a bad matchup, they have a high grade over the next 4 weeks. The first win now buy is Tyreek Hill. The Dolphins have the number 1 passing battle score, the best matchups over the next 4 weeks for wide receivers. They get the Rams, the Raiders, the Patriots, and the Packers. Tyreek Hill is still a weapon. He's still being utilized deep, but those plays just haven't translated to fantasy points like they have in the past. 9th in air yard share, but he's also 9th in unrealized air yard share. So those deep plays are not converting into fantasy points like we hoped that they would. But there is some positive regression on the horizon. The fantasy points are way less than the expected fantasy points. So there's just a lot of fantasy meat left on that gridiron that I think Tyreek Hill is going to eat up in the short term. And despite not being as productive as we'd hope, he's still showing the skills. He's still beating man coverage quite often. And despite the woes, a top 75 WAR player in 2024. When you look at most trade markets right now, they're a bit suppressed. And there's a reason why. Tyreek Hill's a bit older. And he also hasn't cracked the top 30 in wide receivers since the first week of the season. Tyreek Hill is due. The schedule lines up perfectly. That is why Tyreek Hill is a must buy for teams that need them dubs. The second win now buy is Tyrone Tracy Jr., rookie from the New York Giants. The Giants have the number 1 rated rushing battle score heading into these next 4 weeks. They get the Panthers. They have a bye. After that, they got the Buccaneers and the Cowboys. Those are 3 very advantageous matchups for opposing running backs in fantasy football. Since Tracy has become the lead back in New York, aka he's gotten 50 plus or more % snap share, he's averaged 97.6 total yards from scrimmage, and he's also averaged nearly 15 fantasy points per game. Those are 5 games with 50 or more % of a snap share. He's 13th in yards per touch. He's also ran a whole bunch of routes. We knew he had the upside in the passing game. He's ran 97 routes this season. He's looked super explosive, and the analytics completely back up the film. He's really an ascending player when you look at his WARP. He's going to be inside that top 100 after this week's game, despite it not really being a big one for fantasy football. And when you look at a lot of the markets right now, how he's being traded, he's going to be a tad expensive. Running backs in week 10, of course, are going to have elevated value. But I think in both ways, whether it be redraft or seasonal, a tear down could be the sneaky way to add Tracy in the second asset. Trading away a player like J.K. Dobbins, who has a tough upcoming schedule, you can use that, get Tracy plus another starting caliber type of a player. And in Dynasty, you can use those second round picks anytime, even an early second, get Tyrone Tracy if you need to win now. The third win now buy is Matthew Stafford. The Rams have the 4th highest passing battle score over the next month. They get the Dolphins, the Patriots, the Eagles, and the Saints. Really, the Eagles that's the only matchup that really could present an issue. The other ones have been pretty soft for quarterbacks. There's been 3 games this season where Stafford has had the boys, where he's had both Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. He's averaged 298 passing yards. He has 7 total touchdowns in those games. And in the 3 games where the 3 guys are on the field together, those 3 with 3, QB 13, QB 5, QB 13. So he's perennially a top 15 quarterback with top 5 to 8 upside The Matthew Stafford market, of course, depends on the league that you're playing in our 1 QB seasonal leagues. He can be had for a depth piece if he's even rostered. But in Dynasty, of course, he's going to be more highly sought after. In Superflex, he's guaranteed to be on a roster. But given where he's at, given his overall production, given his age, you could probably move that depth piece plus maybe a mid to late second in those Dynasty Superflex. Either way, Matthew Stafford is a must buy if you need wins over these next 4 weeks. The fourth player that you should be buying if you need wins right now is Courtland Sutton. The Broncos have a top 10 passing battle score. They got the Chiefs, the Falcons, the Raiders, and the Commanders. After the Chiefs, you got 3 very advantageous matchups for opposing wide receivers. Courtland Sutton has been sneaky good in 2024. He's actually coming off back-to-back 100-plus yard receiving games. He's got 4 games this season where he's scored 15 or more fantasy points, and there are a ton of analytical indicators in his profile that suggest there's absolutely some positive regression just around the corner. Matter of fact, you could make the argument, people, that we are in the midst of that progression given his last 2 games and how good that they've been for the Broncos and how good that they've been for fantasy football. And when you look at his 2024 WARP, he's been way more valuable, I think, than a lot of league markets truly realize. Speaking of those league markets and how they've developed around Courtland Sutton, he's just kind of been that forgotten man. There's many, many leagues you can look to where he's probably on a bench and really not looked at like a valuable asset. He's being started in just about 50% of sleeper leagues across the board. I think he could be had for a running back 4, definitely a running back 3. You could move that late second in Dynasty. He could be had at a good price, and he is an absolute buy if you need wins over these next 4 weeks. The last buy that you gotta target if you need wins in the short term is TJ Hockenson. The Vikings have the 5th best passing battle score. They just square off against the Jaguars, the Titans, the Bears, and the Cardinals. There's not a whole lot of stats to really back up a TJ Hockenson buy other than the fact that he's just been a warp monster in the past. And tight ends, well, if you use warp, and if you don't, go to southharmonff.com, get the warp tool. If you use warp, you will realize that tight ends typically don't have a ton of value, but Hockenson in the past has been a warp monster. He has been a difference maker at a position that really don't have many difference makers across the board. And in his first game back, 4 targets, 3 catches, 5.7 fantasy points. He's really just going to be set aside. There's not a whole lot of spectacular, not a whole lot of shine around Hockenson given the dud in his first week back on Sunday Night Football. The fact of the matter is he's being rostered everywhere, but in our redraft leagues, he's being rostered by teams that probably have bad records. And he still cost like 120, 125 overall pick in redraft, so that hasn't helped. And in Dynasty, he's probably being rostered by a lot of retoolers or rebuilders. Teams that are looking like they need to make deals to change the outlook of their season one way or another. Doesn't matter the format. So TJ Hockenson is a buy in all formats if you need wins over these next 4 games. TJ Hockenson, Courtland Sutton, Matthew Stafford, Tyrone Tracy Jr., and Tyreek Hill. Those are my 5 must buys if you need wins in the short term. I'm Matty Kiwoom. Head over to southharmonff.com. Get the articles, the rankings, the warp tool. Hop in the lab. Get over to YouTube, South Harmon. Get all the videos. Like, subscribe, like this video, leave a comment. Let's get it going. Join the South Harmon community. Go to patreon.com/South Harmon. See you next time. Peace.